And let's go to my presentation and let's see if you can see my screen there. Can you see these slides I have, guys? It says start your own consulting practice.
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So welcome everybody. My name is Juan Soto. I'm a Microsoft Access MVP. I'm also the president of ITImpact. We have been more than practice. I think it's close to 30 years now. Oh, actually 2014. Yeah, it's been more than 30 years. I got to update this logo to the 30 years. And we're one of the few Microsoft partners, and probably the only one that focuses on Office programming, this particular Access with SQL Server. We're located out of Chicago. I am the director of sales. I'm also a project manager. I have another project manager here. We have employees on 3 continents, North America, South America, actually 4 continents now, Europe, and also the Philippines, which is the Asia continent. And I'm trying to figure out how I can advance this. Let me see if there's, oh, there it is, okay. So use my contact information. I'm at Twitter at jsoto22. That's my email, jsoto@itimpact.com. So, please link in with me at linkedin.com/m/Juan Soto. So I'll pause here if you want to do a quick screenshot of the screen. And by all means, stay in touch with me. And Susan, you're able to see if there's anybody in the waiting area? You can admit them?
I am not able to see that, but if you go on, do you see a section to manage participants?
Yeah, you know what? I might be able to do that on another computer. That way I can see both.
Yeah, there's in your meeting, there should be an option to manage participants, and you scroll down to the more section.
Yeah.
And then there's an option, attend. You can disable the put attendee in waiting room on entry. There should be a enable disable. If you're not seeing it, don't.
I disabled the waiting room.
Okay.
And the passcode. It won't let me do that. It's either the waiting room or passcode. So I don't know if yeah, so it won't let me do that.
Okay, I'm going to log into the actual Zoom account online and see if I can fix it there.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if there's anybody in the waiting room here. Yeah, there is. All right, welcome everybody. Dale, welcome Dale, welcome George. And welcome George Hepworth, Dale. You just started, so you haven't missed much. All right, let me go back to the presentation. So this is me. You can hopefully you got the information. I'll do that. Now this is a presentation that I use to talk about the consultant life. You know, we have a fairly large practice. We have employees on 4 continents, and we all focused on mostly 99% of it is Access with SQL Server. We do some Power BI and some other web the programming, but mostly it's Access. And the reason we focus on Access is there's not too many sharks in the waters. If I were a .NET shop, I'd be competing with everybody and their mom, people in India, other Microsoft partners. I mean, there is a lot of work in .NET, don't get me wrong, but I feel that in the Access world, it's a lot easier. So for example, there's only 18 Access MVPs. I'm sure there's a way more .NET MVPs. And it's been a great way to grow the business by focusing on Access with SQL Server. So today's topic is how to sell Access with SQL Server solutions. And I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom, how I do it, techniques I use. I'm the sales director, so I'll be able to provide you with some great advice. If you're a consultant thinking about starting the consulting life, this is the chat for you. Or if you want to be better and managing relationships and how to convince people. Maybe you work at a business and you're not a consultant, but you're trying to convince your upper management to invest in upgrading your Access backend to SQL Server, right? And so we'll talk about how to do that. This is an interesting anecdote. My son walked to my office one day and says, "Dad, My friends tell me Access is Mickey Mouse, that there's no business in Access. And I say, really? Well, you went to college and you didn't have to take out any loans, right? Yeah. And your mother and I, we go to Europe every year, right? Yeah. And I have a Tesla in the garage. And yeah, okay, where do you think that money comes from? From Microsoft Access. I'm like, oh, okay. So, it's like, he's like, he sees the light now. Let me see if I skip the slide. Okay. All right. So one thing that I always emphasize is that you want to hire consultants and not programmers, right? The consultant is able to talk to a customer, is able to relate to a customer's business, understand the language of business. Let me see if there's anybody in the waiting room here. And so, I always tell people we're business consultants first and programmers second, because basically, if you want to sell Access with SQL Server solutions, you're basically solving a business problem, right? And so Access and SQL Server is the means by which you solve that business problem. So the first step in selling an Access with SQL Server solution is to understand your customer's requirements, understand the pain, understand how is it that the Access with SQL Server can help them. It could very well be that Access with SQL Server is not the solution. I've had that happen to me, where I realized, guys, this is not what you need. You really need a web app, right? Or you really need something else. I don't suffer from when all I use is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so bottom line, you're here to solve business problems using computer technology, right? Whether it's Access SQL Server, a .NET app, or web application, or whatever that might be, Power App, that's where we're here. And so I'm going to walk you through that process of being able to talk to your clients, understand, do that initial analysis, and understand how to sell them on the solution. This is some general tips. I also use the same presentation for people who want to start to be able to do this. So I also encourage people to use SEO, right? Because how do you get leads, right? Well, you get leads to Google AdWords, and but we also use SEO, search engine optimization. And so I'm going to skip this part, but having a great website is essential, of course, if you want to use SEO. We spend a lot of money in SEO every month, but then again, we make a lot of money off SEO. So we spend thousands of dollars on Google AdWords, and I can literally talk all night about Google AdWords and how to optimize that. I have no problem teaching you guys how I do business, right? I once had an employee tell me, well, why do you tell people everything you do? And I'm like, well, first of all, there's plenty of work for everybody. There's plenty of access work for everybody. And second of all, just because you watch Kung Fu videos on YouTube, that doesn't make you a Kung Fu expert, right? So I can tell you everything I do and how I do it, and it's not going to make you a great at sales. But I'm hoping that you do become a sales and take advantage of these tips I'm going to give you. We use Dynamics CRM 365 to track our leads and opportunities. That's how I can see it. I have a funnel there at the bottom right with hot, warm, and cold opportunities. So there are several types of, I'm browsing over this because I want to get to the topic of how to get to Access SQL Server. But you got people who call, they immediately call, and the first thing they ask you is, what's your rate? What's your rate? So we tell them what the rate are, what our rate is, and they hang up and they look for somebody who's cheaper, right? So if the conversation starts with, what's your rate? I tell them right away, because I don't want them occupying the telephone line. I can have somebody who's waiting in the wings to really use us regardless of the rate that we have, because we bring that value relationship. And then you got people who like to talk. They just talk and talk and talk, and they're just talkers and they're not ready to buy. And then you got people with immediate needs, which is my favorite kind of clients. All right, this is the meat and potato of this, and that is the 1 hour. We usually use an hour. Once you've got somebody who's interested in going to Access with SQL Server and you did that initial qualification, right? You have to understand their needs. I recently closed a shotgun shell factory in the US where they're using Excel. to manage their factory. It's a $14 million a year business, and they produce shotgun shells. And they're using Excel. And the fact of the matter is that I have extensive experience with production. I'm an operations guy. In other words, I've done food. I've done pharmaceutical production. I've done jewelry production. I've done medical devices. I've done union environments, non-union environments. I've worked first, second, and third shift. And that's what really makes me a great consultant, because I have all the expertise behind me. So when somebody calls and says, hey, I got this shotgun factory and I'm using Excel, I can relate with them, right? Because to produce in a factory, you need to be the materials in on time. You need the solution to receive those materials in the warehouse. You need to keep track of where are they in the warehouse. The Access needs to keep track of the production schedule. And then you need to create a BOM. And then you need to, so I get it, right? I understand everything that's involved. So we do get a lot of manufacturing clients. In fact, manufacturing is probably one of the most profitable sectors that we have. And you'd be surprised how many factories in the US use Access with SQL Server for their needs. Now, usually when somebody calls me out of the blue and says, hey, you want to use Access to manage our multi-million-dollar business, the first thing I say is, well, are you sure? I mean, there's a lot of ERP packages, enterprise resource planning, that's what ERP means, that you can buy off the market and pay $400,000, $1 million, $2 million. And they include everything, including the kitchen sink, right? They do everything, right? From inventory to order entry to production and all that. But, you know, they're complex. They take a ton of time to implement. They're very expensive. Not only are you paying a huge license fee, but you have to pay a huge license to customize it, custom fees to customize it. And then you have to train your people. And you pretty much have to change your business practices to match the ERP, as opposed to you creating an Access solution that matches their business practices, right? And so I always tell them, okay, have you done your homework, right? Because I don't want you going down this road unless you really, maybe you do find an ERP package that's cheap and expensive that really meets your needs. And they usually tell me, oh, no, yeah, we looked at them all and we're just not happy with what's in the market. We want you to build this one. I'm like, okay, let's go, let's talk. And so you want to hear them. So usually what we do is we book an hour with them for free, right? And the first half hour to 45 minutes, we want to hear their needs. Why is it important that they build a system to keep track of their production? What's unique about their operation that they need Access? We sell them a SQL Server right away because of the fact that SQL Server avoids so many issues that you might have with Access. And I'm going to give you a list of those right now, right? One of them is the fact that you may have, let me get the whiteboard started here. I like to try the whiteboard. And here, let's see here. Whiteboard, there we go. All right. So one of the things that, where was my train of thoughts here? So one of the things is that they have 45 minutes, right? You're listening. And let me see if I can get this thing out. All right, listen. And as you're listening, you're asking questions, right? And I'm going to open up the mics here to see if you guys can. All right, can you guys see my whiteboard?
Yep. Yeah, I can. Go ahead.
All right, great. You're asking questions, all right? Why is it important that you need to use Access? Why is it that you need an Access system? And why is it that now, to be fair, most of the times they call us because they want to upgrade the SQL Server, or they already have an Access program in place. And so we ask them, why is it that you want to upgrade? And we're getting a lot of project work because they use an older version of Access 2003, and they were just forced to go to Access 365 because Windows 11 doesn't run Access 2003 particularly well. And so in that same vein, we say, okay, yeah, we can do 2000 Office 365, but you also need Access Backend SQL Server. So one of the issues, the nice thing about SQL Server is that you avoid corruption. And I apologize if I explain about corruption. You know, those Chinese characters that you get when your Access database file goes bad. And it's much more robust. You're not going to shut down Access. Now, one of the problems that people have when they have an all access solution is they don't know how to properly segment the front end, back end, use one file. And so when somebody crashes, everybody crashes. But even if you do separate the front end, everybody's copying the front end, the Access file can still crash and bring out everybody. And that way is a SQL Server backend, right? So it's much more robust and it's much more secure. Now, I've mentioned this in the past. I've walked into many situations where people are storing confidential information, HIPAA information, such as social security numbers, credit cards, and so forth. And it really is a problem, right? Because the fact that I can easily walk out of there with by copying the Access backend file to a USB drive or email the file to myself, and I have all your data, right? And yes, you can password protect it, but we all know you can bypass the password protection. In fact, there is an individual on the web who specializes in breaking into Access files. To be fair, he makes you prove that it is your file before he does it for you. So, but we know that there are techniques out there that on the web that will bypass that security. Not so with SQL Server, right? You can use Active Directory domains and so forth. Now, I was earlier late last year, I went to see a bank in Illinois. He was using SQL Server with Access, and they were using the SA password to linking tables, and they were using all these poor practices. And I start showing them and says, look, you know, every employee in this bank can use this data and see the data. That's a big no-no. Every employee can go in there and modify the passwords. Look, you have a table of passwords. That's a big no-no. And it was just a real eye-opener for them, the fact that they do that. So we created a page on our website for SQL Server security audits, and not SQL Server security, but Microsoft Access security audits, where people can request an audit on the database, and we can come in and analyze and see if they're following best practices. But this secure is the #1 reason that you can get IT to come on board, because I can't tell you how many times I have a manager calls me up and says, hey, Juan, I need you to upgrade this database to SQL Server, and you know their IT is hesitant. And so invariably, I'll need to sit down with the IT folks and speak with them, right? And to why is it that we need them to give us either a slice of an existing SQL Server, or let us install SQL Server Express for this department, or let us use our current SQL Server and give us the DB owner privileges. So that we try to get DB owner privileges to the database. If not, then we can get DB reader and DB writer, and then we can just give them a file to update a script, a T-SQL script to make changes to SQL Server. But when you're talking across the conference room table or virtually with somebody in IT, right, what is it that they want to hear? What are the trigger words that they want to hear to convince them to come along for this ride with you and be able to nail the business and be able to start the project? And there are several techniques that we use for that. #1 is AD, Active Directory. And we tell them, look, right now your existing solution is using a table of passwords that's not encrypted. And instead of using a table of passwords, what we will recommend is you use Active Directory groups. And then you validate those Active Directory groups in your SQL Server security model. And then when you have, for example, a new employee starting in the company, you just put that employee in the right security groups in Active Directory, and now they have access to the proper functionality. And so if you want at least 3 groups, we want the admin group, the power user group, and the read-only group. And so the admin group, if you put somebody in that group, then they'll go to the admin section. We have access to the admin section in Microsoft Access, and we have code in our Access databases to be able to check what group are you in, in order to provide you access to the right security context. So Active Directory is key to be able to do that. And so learning how to integrate Active Directory and use Access with SQL Server solutions is going to make you that much more better and be able to convincing IT to to give you the access to the SQL Server, right, to the jewels, the crown jewels. The next thing I want to be able to emphasize is security. Now, security, you might think that in security that there is a how can I say this? It's Active Directory. It's not, right? There is another aspect of security, which is encryption of sensitive fields. Now, when you have a client who wants to store social security numbers, this is always a great example of social security numbers, right? Maybe it's a patient database that has social security number. Maybe it's a credit card application process where social security number. We actually worked with the company out west that collects loan information, and part of the loan process is to collect social security numbers. Well, you need to be able to store that in SQL Server with additional level of security by encrypting those columns. So encrypting the column in SQL Server requires that you decrypt them in Access. And the way that works is you use a certificate. So you set up encryption in SQL Server to use a certificate, and then you use that certificate to decrypt it. Now, when you ever have a sequence like this, where somebody insists on storing social security number in their Access database, I always try to convince them, does every employee need to see the full social security number? Or can we get away with just showing them star, 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 and the last 4 digits of the social security? And sometimes they say, yeah, you know what, for certain people, and we're going back to Active Directory, right? For certain people, they can see the last 4 digits. And so maybe we'll create a new Active Directory group for people who need to see the full social security number, and everybody else by default sees the last 4 digits. So there's several ways to go about this, right? You want to discuss that with IT and with the user, with the manager who's representing the users in the background, and say, okay, you're storing social security numbers. Well, does everybody need to see the full social security? Are you okay with us encrypting the social security column? So in case somebody does end up stealing your SQL Server database, all they see is Chinese characters for the social security column, right? Now, this works through security certificates that are generated through the encryption process. You want to make sure you store the those certificates in a secure location on the server, so that only a few select people have access to those certificates. Because the last thing you want to do is have somebody hack into your SQL Server, steal the database, and steal the certificates, right? Because that would defeat the whole purpose of encrypting the columns. Now, to be honest, I want to bring about something that's going to make all of this a lot easier for us later this year. And that is the new graphing capabilities that are coming to us, to Microsoft Access. If you go to the roadmap, you'll be able to see in the roadmap, there is a graphing tool. Now, when I first heard the word graphing, I thought it was charts, but it's not. And there's another contest in Microsoft. And with that graph, with the graph add-in in SQL Server and Microsoft Access coming later this year, it's going to be a lot easier for us to read Active Directory groups. So I'll give you, for instance. Okay, all right. I'll give you, for instance, right now when we need to read, who can see what you're sharing here? Everybody should be able to see it now. Has anybody seen my whiteboard?
Yeah, I can see your whiteboard.
All right, who cannot see my whiteboard? Because I see somebody here asking a question in chat. Let me see my chat here. Let me bring up my chat. If you can't see the whiteboard, let's see who's saying. Sorry, too tired. Have to go to class. All right. I thought somebody was not able to see it. Okay. Okay, the new graphing capabilities Access is going to be amazing, because right now, in order to see Active Directory, we use APIs. They are well documented. You can go to the web, add those APIs to secure BVA modules, and then you'll be able to read out the directory groups. It's kind of hokey. It's not user-friendly, but it works. With the graphic capabilities, you'll be able to, you'll be able to go ask for those active directory groups, and they come back as a table, which actually blows my mind away, because now a table, I can use a record set to parse the groups of active directory. I can see what which groups they belong to, right, in the active directory, among other things. I'm hoping also that extends to other things, such as reading their emails. Right now, to read emails, I gotta create a link to their Outlook clients. And then use a reference or use link binding to read their email, which is entirely doable. In fact, I have a blog post at accessexperts.com/blog on how to read emails. But I'm hoping with the graphing connector that comes back as a table of emails, and they'll be able to read the body as it says a field on the table, and the attachment as another column on the table. I don't know how it's going to show up, but when they actually released the graphing connector a couple of years back, and they had to pull it because it was exposing way too much information from the user, and they realized, oh my gosh, we just giving the kingdom to like passwords and all these other stuff was showing up as table format in Access. So they had to pull it and say, okay, we need to pare this down significantly. It was too powerful, basically. So keep your eyes open for that graphing connector. You can learn more about graphing connector at the online, and that's going to be a real boon to making this a lot easier. All right, so we talked about Active Directory and security. The other aspect of IT is the fact that IT are not access experts. They are not access experts. And so, I tell them, look, this is not your forte. It is ours. And do you really want to handle these issues you're having here because you don't have SQL Server, right? Corruption, people opening tickets to your help desk. Hey, my database is gone and I need to restore it. And nobody here is an access expert and you don't care about learning access. So why not leverage the SQL Server investments to reduce the number of help tickets and be able to provide a better experience for your user base? And then here with the IT is the last thing is you want to be able to follow IT practices. Many IT departments have volumes of three binders of practices, whether it's the standard security practices. And I got news for you. Access is pretty much embellished a lot of those. But by moving the data in SQL Server, it'll help them pass security audits. It'll help them gain control of that data. And it'll help them back it up. And it will help them with these mission critical apps, because bottom line, that's what we're really talking about, right? The chronology of an access application in a corporate environment is there was a need that came up. Somebody filled that need by learning Microsoft Access internally. Bob in the warehouse, he's great with Access, and he picked up a book and designed a really nifty application. And then the application became mission critical. But guess what? Bob left. And now nobody knows how it works. And the application starts going bad. And IT starts getting calls, says, hey, this application that we use to ship widgets, going bad. We need to fix it because right now the production line's down. And the IT throws their hands up, but what is this? It's not part of our ERP. How is this? What is this? I have no idea what this is. Meanwhile, the vice president of operations is ragging the CIO, saying, you got my production lines down, dude. You need to fix this for me. And so that's usually a chronology of a Microsoft application. It becomes mission critical. I'll give you a great example of that. I had a client who does ink printers. When you look at the bottom of a cell phone, you look at the bottom of of a beer can or a soda can of Coke or Pepsi, you see the lot number and you see these little dots. Well, those print heads are underneath the conveyor, and the cans are going high speed. I mean, literally hundreds of cans per minute are going over that print head. And it's using electromagnetic force to print on those cans through a print head that's a magnetically charged print ink that's going through. That's the only way to print that fast on a can, is to use a cannon that's pretty much accelerating that ink through its head and depositing it as it goes through. And this conveyor needs to be a certain speed, because otherwise the letters will become too wide or unmanageable. And so this manufacturer used Microsoft Access, because even though they had a multi-million-dollar ERP system on the production floor, because either IT didn't have the resources to customize ERP, they didn't have, they went back to the ERP vendor, says, oh yeah, we can have those features, it's going to cost you $1.2 million. And by the way, every time there's an upgrade, it's a $100,000 charge because you have a custom implementation of software, right? That's where they get you. So somebody had a brilliant idea using Microsoft Access and tie into the ERP application through SQL Server and grab the data and download the orders and see what's up to be produced in there. And, it started as a very small Access application. It quickly grew in importance on the production lines at this factory. And they gave me a call and says, hey, we need your help here because we're not Access experts. And to this day, they still call from time to time on doing that. But having a mission critical application, right, is a great way to justify SQL Server because of all the issues you're having here that you want to fix, right? And so I urge you, when you're trying to convince somebody to go to SQL Server, to use that terminology, mission critical, security, Active Directory, right? Drop these terms into the conversation and be able to speak with authority on that so that you can convince them that you are the man or your lady or your company is the one that can get them to this, right, to the promised land and be able to provide them with with a secured environment. Now, we talked about the 1 hour, right? And so first 30, 40 minutes, I'm talking to them about their needs and I'm listening, right, what their issues are. And then I say, okay, well, I have a demo I'd like to show you, because at the beginning of the call, we tell them where we can make it access, sing, and dance. And it says, okay, this is how we can make it sing and dance. So we have a great demo. It's got wonderful features in there, things that they've never seen in Access, because a lot of times these people have never seen a professionally done Access application. They just haven't. Haven't seen it. So you need to show them that. It says, look how nice this looks. And I get comments all the time on ours. As people say, well, is this a web app? No, this is Microsoft Access. And so it's critical for you to be able to demo them. And then as I'm demoing this, and we use the same demo for all our calls, but then I modify the conversation. Remember how you told me you had you'd like to be able to see an order queue of your widgets? Well, this is how it would look like. This is similar to how it would look like. Or maybe it's a engineering work order queue, or maybe it's a cell phone tower maintenance queue, or whatever it is that they're trying to track and access. I use their terminology that they were telling me in the first 40 minutes of the call to be able to then put in the context of the demo, and they just eat it up. They just love it. And then I also walk them through all the different things that we can do. Look at the stamp saver. Who can see what you share? I don't know why that keeps coming up. Let me close it up. So I think it's Zoom trying to remind me who can see. So then, let's see, there's anything in the chat. Let's see this one in the chat. Okay, yeah, that was, all right, there's no chat question there. So, yeah, so we use a demo to be able to put their mind at ease, because they don't know us from SWAT. All they did was they went to Google, they put in Microsoft Access Developer Chicago, our ad came up, they clicked through to our website, great looking website, AccessExperts.com. They decided to give us a call. That's all they did. So they don't know us from squad. Yes, we're Microsoft Gold partners. Yes, I'm a Microsoft Access MVP. And, yes, I have some cred, but, you really need to close the deal with phone. Now, 90% of our work is closed over the phone. So we have to have a process in place to get them to yes in this 1 hour, right? How do I get them to spend $25,000 with us over the phone on that 1 hour? How do I get them to spend $50,000, $100,000, right? So we want to be able to first put their mind at ease, that we understand their issues. Then we want to sell them on the purpose of SQL Server, all the great benefits. Then we show a demo of an Access application that's using SQL Server in the cloud. And then we talk about the benefits of cloud, right? Hosting. So we host databases for companies throughout the world on Azure, but they're calling us instead of Azure for the support. So we always say, well, we're using Azure to store your data, but you're not calling Microsoft. You're calling us, your Access consultants. If you have any issues, like for example, maybe they deleted a customer, need to bring it back, or they need a copy of a database for whatever reason, right? And so the hosting allows them to get that free of charge because it's part of the hosting fee. And it's very reasonable. And so we sell them on hosting too, when we do the application for them. And we tell them, look, I have a customer, and I've said this many times in this group. This group means that customer says doesn't want to be on the cloud. Well, but the cloud has some advantages, right? You don't have to worry about server. You don't have to worry about backups. You don't have to worry about stores. You can use it anywhere in the world. You can just log in, right? So you can install the front end on a laptop and be anywhere and be able to log in early and be able to use the application. And, we tell them, look, there is no website. It's not like you can do SQL injection on the website to hack the server. And getting access to data. First, there's no website. There's no www.accesshosting.com, for example, right? It's just an IP address that we are hard code in our web apps. Our Access applications, an IP address that we hard code in our Access applications. A lot of time the customer doesn't even see that. They don't even see the URL that we use to access the server. And so we convince them on using that line. And then towards the end of the call, 1 hour call, I asked them because I've heard what they need, and I've been doing this for so long. I quite understand how much the costs are, right? The average cost. I can see in my mind if it's a $7,000 project or a $25,000 project or a $100,000 project. And towards the end of the call, I said, okay, let's talk about your budget. You have a number in mind, round numbers for this project. A lot of times they tell us, no, we don't have a budget, or no, we don't want to share that with you, or sometimes they do, right? I always ask. Some people do tell me, yeah, I'm thinking about spending around $5,000. Now, throughout this process, I've been telling myself, okay, I've been analyzing. So this is like a $25,000 project or a $7,000 project. If it's a $7,000 project and they say $5,000, then we're in the ballpark. They said, well, look, it's not going to be $5,000. It's going to be more like $7,000, but we're close. But if they tell me it's a $1,000 budget and it's a $25,000 project, I'll be honest with them. I says, look, the fact of the matter, this is going to be an 8-week project, or it's going to take us 3 months. And you have a lot of issues here that we need to correct. You have to fix the Access database front end first, and before we can upgrade to the SQL Server. And there's a lot of forms that we have to optimize, lots of reports. And it's just really not going to be enough. $1,000 really not going to be. In fact, we're probably looking at $25,000. Is that a deal breaker? Sometimes it is. Sometimes they can't just sell it, and that's okay. I'm not going to sell everybody who comes here, but a lot of times it's not. They just didn't know it's going to be $25,000. And I explained to them. My job is to explain to them why it's $25,000. So this is why it's $25,000. It's going to be 6 to 8 weeks. We have to optimize. You have 200 forms on this application. You have 100 reports. You have 300 queries. Right? This is a lot of work. A lot of those queries need to be converted to views. Sometimes we have to create store procedures. You have to optimize the code to work with SQL Server in the cloud. Right? This is a lot of work, and so I make them see why is it that it's taking so long, and they get it. They understand at that point, and they understand what it is. And so what I usually like to do is wrap up with a series of questions that I know will lead to yes, right? Because I want them to hear the word yes subconsciously. And by that point, I ask them, okay, do you think I've understood the problem? I know that I understood the problem because I was able to take the information they gave me and regurgitate back to them during the demo. So I said, this is how you solve this problem. This is how you solve that problem. This is how you create reports easily. Yeah, and so they're going to, yeah, I know the answer is yes. Yes, Juan, yeah, I think you have a grasp of the situation. Did you like the demo that we showed you and how it can help you and see how it can help? Yes. Are you confident that we can come up with a solution to help you out based on our reputation? Oh, yes, I think you guys. Right, so they're saying yes and yes and yes. All they're hearing is yes from their own lips. And then, it's okay, great. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a formal proposal that's going to have objectives, project plan. It's going to have legal jargon, and they're saying this is your system. This is going to be, you're going to have access to the code. We're not going to, all we ask that you don't resell it, right? Because we use code there. We use all our clients don't reselling. But if somebody does purchase your company, they'll have access to the code as well. And then they get a formal proposal. But then I got them sold on this because then I say, okay, before we end the process, is $25,000 within? Are we in the same ballpark? Oh yeah, we're on the same ballpark. Send me the proposal. A lot of times they just want to do their credit card then right then and there. It's okay, I got my credit card ready. Like, okay, wait a second, we still got to do the proposal. Make sure you get the proposal first, and then we will be more than happy to take the credit card for a deposit. So this sales process, we have this documented. So when I buy a new salesperson, in fact, I got a new salesperson signed later this month. I'm growing the sales department here because we're going to be doing major expansion here worldwide next year. And I want to get the sales core completed up so that we're ready to do this push worldwide. And the fact of the matter is we have this documented and we have this process in place, and I'll train them and all that. But you need to be able to have your own process, right? A lot of you have your own business, and so it's just you, right? You're the sales guy, you're the programmer, you're the invoice person, you're the quality control person, you're the customer service person, right? Customer service rep. I know because I was there. I did that for many years before I started hiring people. So it's imperative that you have this process in place so that you don't have all your eggs in one basket. Because yes, you might get a customer that buys 90% of your time. But guess what? If that customer fires you or no longer needs you, that's 90% of your revenue walks out the door. And so I'm constantly looking at my revenue mix, right? What are my top 10 customers that represent 80% of the business? And if I see a number of 5 or 6, it's great. If I see 2 or 3, that's bad. And so I always want to see that good mix. So if I lose somebody, it's going to hurt me. Yeah, somebody walks out the door, they leave. It's going to hurt me, but it's not going to shut me down. I'll still be able to make payroll. I'll still be able to meet my sales goals, right? I want to be able to replace that revenue. Okay, so I'd like to open up for questions here. Who has a question regarding this, the sales process and how to do it?
I do. When you're quoting a project, do you ballpark it by saying, X amount for forms, X amount for reports, X amount for menus, and I normally say $100 per entity, and that gets me into the ballpark. But in today's market, that's a little low, but that's what I've been using in the past.
Yeah, we don't do it that way, right? We like to do it in aggregate. What is the aggregate here in terms of how much does it cost to upgrade the SQL Server? And so we say, okay, is it a $25,000 project, $25,000 project, or is it a $50,000 upfront project or it's a $7,000 project based on the number of forms and all that. This is highly subjective, right? Because once I get into it, I might have some gotchas, and that's why we always say it's an estimate. This is an estimate. This proposal I'm giving you is for an estimate. It's not a fixed cost project, and they know that going in. But whatever, that sounds like a great way of doing this. So I applaud you for doing that. I don't have the time to do that. I'll break down of every form report and say, okay, every form report is going to take me so many hours. I add up all the hours. But that sounds like a great way of doing it. And, you know, that's, who am I to judge you on how you're doing it? As long as you get to, it's reproducible and it's something that you can do over and over again. And it's worked for well in the past. God bless you. That's great. Great question. Who else has a question for me?
I hate to monopolize you, but when do you go from SQL Server Express up to a full-blown SQL Server? What are your tail marks that tell you that you can't use Express?
Well, look, what's interesting about this is over the years, we've been doing this for 30 years. I can count on one hand people who went from SQL Server Express to SQL Server Standard Edition or Enterprise Edition. This is how good SQL Server Express is, because at the end of the day, we're talking about Access applications that have 200,000 records, maybe 500,000 records. And SQL Server just laughs at that. I mean, SQL Server is designed to handle millions and millions of records. And so when you create an SQL Server Express backend file, it really is the end all and be all. But there are certain issues that will need you to upgrade to Standard Edition. Number one is the amount of users. When you have people complain about performance, and I'll give you a great example. We had an insurance client that had 100 users using the Access front end. Well, they just needed Enterprise, right? Because SQL Server Express was just too slow for them. And so they needed the Enterprise edition. So the amount of users is a big factor. The other thing is slowness, right? So as you add more people, SQL Server Express is just not going to cut it. The other aspect is there are certain features of standard that you don't get with Express, such as the job schedule. Now, there's ways around that. You can use Windows scheduling, create the jobs. But for some clients who just need more robust features of the standard SQL Server set, and so they naturally, they say, I know we'll just have to buy the SQL Server Standard Edition. But usually those are the two cases why we do that.
I have a question, and it's not so much, I guess, on, I work for a company, a manufacturing company, and I need to try to sell them on Access and SQL instead of Excel. A lot of the engineers there use Excel for everything, and it has its place, but I need to try to find a way to sell them on, let's move this stuff over into a database, and it'll just be much easier. Any tips for that?
Yeah, eventually, you're going to have some pain points with Excel, right? It's just not easy in a multi-user environment. So these engineers, they create some complex spreadsheets, and they have to lock it down severely sometimes, because when they send it off to somebody, they don't want the forms to be changed. And, they have to design a form in Excel, and it's a lot of work and a lot of maintenance, and all that can go out the window when you upgrade to a database. And so, George, of course, is one version of the truth. And that's another thing. You can have all these little spreadsheets out there. People are trying to find out what the latest one is. When it's a database, it's just one database, and people have consults on that. The other aspect of this is when you go from Excel to Access, the performance is much better, right? It's just Excel was never designed to handle a large volume of data. What Excel is good for is calculation, graphing capabilities. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes these engineering spreadsheets can take a lot of effort to move to Access, because Access is not Excel. It just isn't. And sometimes we get these projects and they give me a very complex Excel spreadsheet, and I just go, oh my gosh, this is going to take us forever to do an Access database because it's very complex. We had a engineering firm in New York who uses Access to calculate bonuses for their construction projects. And this thing was so complex because PM gets a bonus and the assistant PM gets another bonus, and the bonus is based on whether they meet the budget. And it was just a very complex Excel spreadsheet. We ended up doing it in Access, but it was a very difficult way because, again, Access is not Excel. And so you have to, simulate some functionality Excel has in Access, and the formulas have to be hard-coded in Access. But, you do it all the time. So I don't want to dissuade you, but there is some great points to be made in terms of security, right? For example, Excel, you may have some people can walk out with the Excel spreadsheet, right? And they know the password to the Excel spreadsheet. And so they might just walk out and go work for a competitor. And now they have your complex engineering spreadsheet. You don't know where those spreadsheets are. They're in the wild. And so the IP, intellectual property, is lost. It's a lot harder to do that with Access with SQL Server. Next thing is, like George was mentioning, the one source of truth for the databases where everybody has their data. Ease of use, not so much maybe, but the fact is that you can do a lot more data and do a lot better reports. Because, when you have, I have this customer once, they had a spreadsheet for every month of the year. And then to do a yearly analysis, you have to go through 12 spreadsheets to aggregate the data. And it's just a pain in the butt to be able to do data aggregation that way. So hopefully, whatever I asked you to give some good ammunition.
Thank you.
Great question. Is this your first time joining us?
Well, is it my first time joining this group or working with this group? Yes, it is. Yep.
All right, great. Hopefully we can see you again in September. We're going to have to take a summer break, and we'll be back in September.
Okay.
But hopefully you'll join us back in September after the summer. We're starting with SQL Server Academy, and September, October, November is SQL Server Academy 1, 2, and 3, and this is how we kick off our season every time.
Okay, awesome.
So,
great, thank you.
All right, who else has a question for me?
I would like to make just a comment on the earlier question by the gentleman who was asking about the difference between using SQL Express and maybe a standard. If you're wanting to do any kind of integration with other systems and you need to use SQL Server integration services, that is not available in the SQL Server Express. So I know we've done jobs where we're pulling in data and having all the work done on the server side, and we needed to use integration services for that. So that's where the client needed to then switch from Express Edition.
Great point, Susan. Thank you. All right.
I have
Any
another
other
one.
questions? Yes, sir.
When do you use a pass-through query and when do you use a stored procedure?
All right, good question. So a pass-through query is the only way you can execute a stored procedure in the GUI, right?
Yeah.
So you can do it in code using ADODB. And in fact, I have a blog post. If you search the web for easy ADODB, you'll see the methodology I use, the easy execute stored procedures. But generally, when you use a pass-through query, you can use a pass-through query with views. You can use a pass-through query with stored procedures, and then you can bind that pass-through query to a report, so that when you run the report, it executes the pass-through query and in turn does the stored procedure. So the only way you can use a stored procedure in the front end is through a pass-through query. And the only way you can use stored procedure in your code is, there's several ways to use it, but we recommend ADODB.
Also, I'd like to add there, the pass-through queries are great for when you're wanting to return a record set from the stored procedure, because it'll just launch your final select statement and it will open it up as a query. The other time where I actually switched from using a stored procedure to a pass-through query was where I was getting the timeout error in Access. And by using the pass-through query, I was able to reset the timeout.
Okay. So in that case, you modify the pass-through query parameters to increase the timeout.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Good point. Now, you can't use a pass-through query without records coming back. There is a property of the pass-through query where you can set returns records now. So if you have a pass-through query that executes something, like, for example, updates the pricing in the law product by 10%, then you would be able to modify the pass-through query, because otherwise you get an error message saying no record were returned back. And this is some of the topics that we discussed at LEAF and the SQL Server Academy. Sorry, September.
I'll be
pass-through
there.
query.
I'll be there.
All right. Good man. All right. Well, usually I don't get these many questions, so I'm excited. I love these questions. All right. Any other questions before we go?
I have
Did
just
you guys
one.
like the? Go ahead.
Can I ask one? When you're doing your presentation, do you ever talk about the people who are actually going to do the work? Do you talk about their experience, or is that something you just take for granted?
Give me a for instance, George.
Well, for example, if somebody has a particularly difficult problem, you say, well, we have people on our staff who specialize in that area. Or is it something you just take for granted that that's the way it's going to be? I mean, I'm not sure I'm phrasing that really well, but
Yes. So
do you ever
look,
leverage the credentials of your staff to help sale?
do I leverage? Yes, all the time, right? As you know, Ben Clothier, who works for us, is a noted book author, several tomes on Access with SQL Server and also SharePoint. He is a co-author of the only book in existence of Access with SharePoint. And I believe there was another guy who helped him on that project, on that particular book. Who was that?
Me.
Yes, George. George, who's with us tonight, is a co-author of at least that book. Have you co-authored other books in the past, George?
Yeah, we worked on another one. Yeah. Ben and I
And
worked
so George,
on the Access Web
go ahead.
app. Yeah, too.
Oh yes, the Access Web App, which is no longer in circulation, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
don't run off and buy that book.
Yeah, neither of them are.
But George is extremely knowledgeable on Microsoft Access. He also the chapter president for Access Specific, which is on what day of the month, George?
We meet the first Thursday. Our most recent meeting was Thursday of last week.
First Thursday. So I urge you guys to join them. Are you going to have a meeting next in June?
Yes, Crystal's going to come and present. And I'll.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's the topic?
She's going to show us how to build the periodic table of elements on a form in Access without code.
Oh wow, she's just great with the UI.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how she does that. But yeah, that's it. Yeah.
She has another tool where you can do some beautiful calendars and forms and reports. I've never had a chance to use them, but I understand it's quite powerful. So she's talked about that at Access User Group lunchtime. So may check out the YouTube video saying on that. So I urge everyone, if you to get your fix, he starts at 6:30 p.m. California time, which would be 8:30 Chicago time and 9:30 New York time. But if you can join George, you can see his chapter at AccessUserGroups.org and look for the Pacific chapter to get the Zoom link for his meeting. So I urge you guys to participate in that.
Yeah.
Any other? Go ahead.
Let me say Dale's on the call too. You might want to.
Yes. And by the way, Dale joins us. He's with the Eastern group, which is meets in the morning at 9:30 in the morning, right, Dale?
9 o'clock on the third Friday of every month. Well, third Friday August through June.
August through June. And so when are you meeting this month in May? What day?
Let's see, next Thursday, the 20th,
Next Thursday at 9 o'clock.
9 a.m. Eastern time.
Yes. So I urge you guys to, what, do you have a topic already for this month?
We do. We're gonna do what I attempted to do last month, but couldn't do because of an internet connection failure. We're gonna talk about exporting data to Excel.
Okay, great topic. I hope you have a lot of participation there. So look, the point of this is you have a wide range of meetings at different times and dates. I urge you guys to check out the calendar at AccessUserGroups.org, AccessUserGroups.org. We also have a SQL converter tool that converts your Access SQL to T-SQL, which is very popular worldwide. And I'll be talking about that in our next year that starts in September. We'll show you some stats on the usage. We use Google Analytics, and I have no problem sharing that with you guys. Any other questions? These have all been great questions so far. Anybody else? Did you guys like the topic?
The differences between views and stored procedures. When would you make a view and when would you make a stored procedure?
Well, look, the view is like a query, right? So whenever you need a query, you want to create that in SQL Server. And so when you need a query in Access, you go build a query in Access. When you need a query in SQL Server, it's called a view. So anytime you need a query, you can view. A stored procedure, however, is like a VBA module where you use code to do something. So a great example of a stored procedure is sometimes you have to do a query and then you have to parse through the records in that table, temporary table in SQL Server to do something, and then do another query on that temporary table. And then at the end of that, all that, you have a result set that you can return back to the Access through a pass-through query or using the ADLDB record set. So whenever you need to do a complex set of operations that you can't do by chaining views together, then you probably use stored procedure to do that.
Wow, I've been using stored procedures wrong.
Yeah.
I got to read up on that then.
Yeah, or join us in September for SQL Server Academy Part 1.
I will be there.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Did you guys like the topic today? You feel you got something out of it?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Well, if you did, I would appreciate some feedback on Twitter at jsoto22. Make sure you let them know today's topic was really good, and that will maybe motivate people to come to our meeting next time. And also our LinkedIn, please join the Access with SQL Server group on LinkedIn and leave a comment there if you can for me as your way of showing appreciation toward this humble servant. And I'd like to thank everybody who's on the call today. We are going into our extended summer break, so no meeting May, June, or July. We'll be back in September for a fresh round of sessions. Look forward to seeing that. I want to wish everybody a wonderful summer. Thank you so much for showing up tonight. This has been Juan Soto, and so long, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Jan.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Next one.